one of the first machines we bought early was a wood chipper. So when we have a lot of woods, and so when we worked in the woods, instead of just stacking leaving the slash like most people do, we actually viewed the woods as a biomass, a big biomass sink, and we began incorporating the forest into the open land, the shade mobile, to leverage that, and then starting to control the grazing. So, we didn't. One of the most foolish things we did early on was buy a half a train car load of soft rock phosphate. We did soil tests. Oh, you're low on soft rock phosphate. We didn't have the money, but we were convinced that we needed to this because that's what the consultant said, and put on the rock phosphate. It didn't do anything. Why? Because we didn't have enough biological activity. Well, as we started to get the grazing under control, started doing the composting, started adding other species, sheep, chick, poultry, we began to see these fields begin coming alive. Now, we've probably used that, maybe mineral today, but what we've found, other than that, we haven't even applied calcium, mineral, or anything, and we used to be so acidic. There was not a clover plant when we came to the farm, because clover needs a lot of calcium. And I remember well as a late teenager and early 20, as I started taking over operations, seeing, for example, these fields that were nothing but broom sedge, which if you look in a weed book, it'll say, poverty grass grows on calcium deficient soils. And I was starting to see red clover up through the middle of a broom sedge plant. You look in the book, red clover, queen of all the legumes, requires high calcium to grow. And I'm looking, here's queen, requires high calcium to grow, up through the middle of a broom sedge, poverty, low calcium. And because we didn't buy in minerals because we couldn't afford them, I enjoyed this slow transitional witness of the landscape. If we had nuked it with inputs, I would have missed that kind of 3-year progression that I still remember very vividly. And so we didn't spend the money. We took a little time, but we didn't go in debt. And so now we're enjoying,
You're talking a couple of things there, a 3-year progression, and the clover appeared, you didn't sow it, is that right? So you're creating the diversity with your plants and your pasture by just your grazing principles and your biodiversity with your animals.
The way to get to the farmers in our area is after they die and their kids inherit the farm and don't want it and sell the farm to the ex-urbanite who made money in e-commerce and investment banking and buys the farm. That guy becomes my convert. But no, we have one farmer in the area that thinks we're smart, and that's one after 60 years. Everybody else, literally, again, they're wonderful people, got a great neighborhood. I would trust all my neighbor farmers with my grandchildren, my bank account, but I don't trust them with the land or my food. And they feel the same way. They literally call me bioterrorist. They call me Typhoid Mary because they think my animals have to be sick because wellness comes out of a bottle or a syringe. That's the orthodoxy. And so my animals have to be sick. Therefore, when the red-winged blackbirds and the indigo buntings commiserate with my negligently husbanded animals, they're going to take my diseases to their scientifically controlled Tyson chicken houses and, pig houses and whatever, and they're going to get a virus and get sick because I've inoculated a community with illness. And that's, and you can't argue with that. I mean, it just is. I mean, that's their paradigm. That's their paradigm. And Dad made the mistake. I remember it like yesterday. I was, 10 or 11. And he'd gotten a bunch of Andre Voisin stuff, and he started doing this electric fencing, moving around. And we had, fairly decent we have good relationships with the neighbors. We wave and say hi, and it's not like we, give each other the finger or anything. But he was down at the neighbors one day. They having a nice conversation, and he made the mistake of telling him. Now, remember, at this time, our farm was the armpit of the community. I mean, it was known. The reason we bought it was because it was so bad. That was cheap. Back in those days, poor land sold low. And so we bought it. And he was down there, and he told the neighbor that one day we would have 100 cows on our farm. And he came back. Dad was a pretty emotional guy, and I get, I cry at chick flicks too. So I've got a little bit of. I always said you got to be a little bit of sissy to be a caring farmer. You got to be a sissy, because it's just not machismo to come in and tell your bride that you've spent all day making the cows happy. It's a lot more machismo to say smell the diesel fuel, And so anyway, he came back very hurt how the neighbor had just laughed him to scorn, how stupid that was. And I remember him well. He said, I will never again tell somebody what we're going to do. We're going to just do what we're going to do, and we're not going to push on a string. We're going to pull on a string. We're going to lead by example, and if they're interested, they'll be interested, and if they're not, they're not. Today, we run 300 cows.
Let's test that, Joel. I would just like a show of hands of who's learnt something today. Who's learnt something today? And put them down. And now, from today, who's going to go and do something different from what you've heard today? So, and I think there's a lot of non-farmers here. So, I think, Simon, hopefully that answers your question as well. That these sort of forums are. Well, you think that there isn't change. I think that there will be.
So our support, our support structure, my support network, our family, has not been our neighbors. Our support structure has been our customers, who think we're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they would die for us. That's our support network.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, we've often speakers have made the analogy today about the medical self, the health and human health and gut health. And, there is this disconnect between, with human health, you go and treat it with medicine. So you treat it rather than you prevent it. And I think that's probably the same analogy with agriculture, really. It's the prevention, not the cure. We're curing things with chemicals, but we can prevent needing to use them by the other way around.
Mel, just replying to the second part of Simon's question, which is, are farmers here picking up on this information and wanting change? And the answer is very clearly yes. As part of the GRDC Sandy Soils project, we ran a series of farmer roadshows everywhere from Eyre Peninsula to Griffith in New South Wales. Every single group we went to highlighted soil carbon as a major issue and soil biology as an area of interest. And a lot of farmers, particularly on Eyre Peninsula, where we've got high intensity cropping, are very concerned that they're not getting the same bounce from applying urea as they used to, and they're having to apply more and more, and economically it's not sustainable, and they're all concerned that it's causing damage to their soil structure. So this is happening.
Yeah. Look, and just adding to that, we've done a lot of work on this, especially with Michael Jeffrey, as a soil advocate and politics. There's about 120,000 farmers left in Australia. They're sort of very much dying breed. But of those 3,000 have just done it themselves, just out of sheer guts and innovation, and they just want to do it. But there's another 12,000 who've actually spent a lot of money fully briefing, training, going to programs, planning and what have you. And they're the next adopters, and they basically say, yeah, this is right, but I'm really waiting for some sort of policy, environment, certainty, confidence, because, yeah, often they have to make a major investment financially to change. They've got a lot of debt on them. So in every way, they're on board, they're involved, they're very well informed, they'd like to go, but really they're getting, the red tape, the problems are really there. And I think it comes to what Melissa said, the real breakthrough is the demand drivers, right? Where is the market? Where are those concerned customers that say, look, I need something different? That difference is nutritional integrity, health, and they're saying, no, bugger this, I need my health is more important. I'm willing to differentiate product and buy on that health criteria. And that's where the change is. We only need, 10%, 15% tipping point, and it's in a sense latently it's there, but there's still impediments in that policy environment. And of course a lot of knockers, blockers, saying, hang on a minute, we need 20 years more research or whatever to say before it can happen practically. And then the practical demonstrations and blueprints that come from leaders like Joel, very, very important, because people say, hey, yes, we can do it. It's simple, it's practical, it pays dividends.
Add something to that. Just to add to that, there's also a timing factor for everything. 1990, when I started telling people about grazing practices and how to change them and why, we had to spend 7/8 of a session fighting about what overgrazing was and why animal numbers, all that bullshit seems to be just dropping off, and we're getting ourselves ready to do what we need to do. What's happened here today could not have happened 10 years ago because the communication wasn't even there yet. You couldn't really build on it. So, you have an input, Joel goes somewhere, and maybe he gets there next time and he thinks, well, bugger all's happened here. But nothing stays the same. It changes and it keeps growing. And the innovation comes from everywhere, not just those leaders that have to be there. They maybe stand out and get skinned and get hurt, but it really comes from everywhere. And there's a timing. And that timing is now, I know that it's much closer than it was. One of the reasons why I'm here, not in South Africa anymore, because this is the place that we can make it happen, because we have enough impetus and we have enough basic knowledge to make it happen. And it's congratulations to our country. This is where we are. It's ready to go.
I think we've got a...
This is my 10th trip to Australia in 20 years, and it just never ceases to amaze me how much innovation is coming out of Australia. I mean, from going way back to permaculture, yeoman's, water for every farm, to permaculture, to now we have Colin Seitz with pasture cropping. We have Darren Dougherty with regrarians. Just the sheer amount that's coming out of here, and I think that it's because unique in the world, Australia is the most fragile continent, but it has money. So its fragility, unlike the Sahara, for example, it is a culture that is fragile, but with the means to pour some capital remediation into, whether it's research, infrastructure, distribution, whatever it is. That's a really unique combination, and I'm always energized when I come here because I learn stuff and I meet innovators and I'm seeing the cutting edge. I take it home, and I think it's happening here because it's fragile, and you're financially well enough off to meet that fragility head on. It's very exciting.
Thank you. And I think some of the challenges too, as our input costs are going up, and it is harder and harder to make a dollar. And so a lot of what's being said today is really, challenging some thinking.
You mean, there's Taranaki in Wood End. There's, Oh goodness! If I start listing farms in Australia, the best thing I know to do is if you're looking for farms that are, doing these kinds of things in Australia, I would check with Regrarians. Just jump on the Regrarians website, or both Nick and Kirsten at Milkwood, Regen Ag, and Kim and Georgie Cruz up in Queensland. They're doing some great stuff. A lot of producers that are with Food Connect in Brisbane are wonderful, wonderful producers. There are, Jonai Farms I was just in the Yarra Valley on Thursday with the catchment authority there, and the host farmer said that I think it was 4 years ago there were only 4 small pastured egg producers in the whole Yarra Valley. Today there's 24. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, we'll just take them over. Our side's going to win because the fertility count is going down so fast in the industrial food eaters. They're all going to sterilize themselves with no fertility, and our side will be the only one that can procreate. So we're just going to take over the earth by default.
That sounds about right, Joel, I think. We do have 2 very innovative farmers at this table, though. We have Dick Richardson and we have Bruce, who are very innovative and use grazing techniques to get where they've got to. Plus, Bruce has, from Bruce's talk before, some of the Lorico inputs and additives as well. So they're on their way.
I used to, some years ago, when I finished my PhD, I went to work for NASA. That's not the space agency, that's the organic certifier. They're based in Stirling. They're Australia's, I think they're the oldest certifier in Australia, and they're really good people. So, if you're looking for somewhere close to home, that would be the first port of call. I'm sure the others are good as well, but those guys are, they're full of people who basically built that industry since the 1960s or whenever they started. So, well, it depends what you're looking for. Do your market research and find out what there's obviously, there can be increased costs of production. Depends on your industry, because if it's ginkgo that's tree-based, maybe there's not a lot of difference in management practices, and maybe you get that premium. What was your other question?
Any kind of take, especially scientific take on biodynamics?
Oh, biodynamics, that's right. We actually get a number of biodynamic samples, soil samples in, and usually, and particularly it's interesting if we get conventional and biodynamic together, the biodynamic ones, if something's working in that system, because usually our measures, whatever particular measure of soil microbiology is, usually very good compared to the conventional. So I'm not an organic, I wouldn't just advocate organics. I'm not a huge organic advocate, but there's definitely some advantages to those systems.
Thank you. David, did you have any biodynamic trials in the New Horizons project?
No, and I guess my only comment is that there are aspects of biodynamic which probably you could explain rationally, and I think to some extent Joel's doing some biodynamic stuff, but he's probably just not planting cow horns at midnight on the third moon post something or other. So, the trouble is, again, you're dealing with a complex ideology there, which has got some really good beneficial stuff in there, which we can support scientifically. Some other stuff which gets mixed up into it, whether it adds any real benefit or not, I don't know.
Look, it's a very critical question and a very important area, because up to now, basically, there's the true believers, the people that had those values, and organics was sort of associated with those values, and different groups, biodynamics all under that hat. And of course, they define things. Okay, well, organics is we're not using artificial chemical fertilizers, we're not using biocides, and they try to quantify things, on those material criteria. Now, because of that wide market realisation, food, health matters, etc., The big guys are really coming in to say, hey, we've got to be in this space. You know, the 6 major global agrochemical companies have spent over $200 billion in the last 6 months repositioning themselves, corporate takeovers to get into this biology, agricultural biology space. I know from colleagues in the US, they're very concerned because obviously, does a hydroponic glasshouse with robotics, does it certify for organics because they're not using biocides or chemical fertilizers? Precisely. I mean, that's what the debate is, that yes, they're moving in, wanting to have organic labels. So actually, we're in that bigger, fundamental issue, goes back to what we said, the customer, the differentiation, the demand drivers, and what are the real criteria to differentiate what you do. And it's not organics, it's actually much more hard edge. It's actually what is the nutritional integrity of the food that you're producing? Has it got those 33 plus essential nutrients in the right concentration ratios, forms, balances? And you only get that depending on how it is grown. Is it grown naturally through these microbial uptake processes, the solubilization, fixation, access, uptake, and cycling? Or is it grown from that soil solution situation? And so I think we're seeing that in the whole world now having to be defined. How is that product grown? What confidence have I got on the integrity of that growing process? And in a sense, what is a label way beyond organics that gives that customer the quality assurance of integrity, but also gives you, the farmer, the premium to survive on?
Yeah, and one of the problems I get is that, for example, a lot of fertiliser products, mineral fertiliser products, obviously not classified as organic. Some are considered to be detrimental in some ways. Yet I certainly know of one certified organic product which has got low nitrogen, phosphorus and trace element levels, but incredibly high mercury and lead.
So we just mentioned the biodynamic thing quickly because I think it's quite important. That's one of the issues, whether if you're short of something on your property and you're making all your own biodynamic preps out of everything off your property, you can perpetuate 25 years without cobalt or whatever it might be, because it wasn't there when you started, and sort of nothing comes from nothing. But and many of them are scientifically you can read through what people have done with the voodoo and work out that there is real scientific stuff happening in the background. Yes. Yeah. But I think still we need to, even in this forum, somebody's got to stick their neck out and say the intent of the human element in any community of organisms and all the activities that are going on in there does make a difference. It plays a role. And that biodynamics obviously has a lot of the plays on that without really even necessarily saying it. But you just have to think it through. I'm not saying everybody has to go out there and put those energy towers and stuff, and I'm not saying that, and a lot of people get a lot of good out of them. But if you've got your mind right about what you're trying to achieve, you're more likely to achieve it, and the country and your livestock and your organisms are more likely to go with you. And there's that element in biodynamics, which is kind of underplayed or swept under the carpet because, it's a bit poo-pooed, but it's important.
Look, I haven't seen any direct results from that sort of equipment. One of the questions I think you always have to ask is, are those changes short-lived or long-term? And certainly with organic carbon, we're experiencing quite a lot of difficulty in trying to find statistically valid ways to actually measure it. So I've seen results presented by various people showing huge increases in soil organic carbon in very short times by doing something, and without actually delving into what's happening and looking at the data, a lot of it I think is highly dubious, because when you put organic material into the soil, a fair bit of it's broken down. The easiest way to build soil organic carbon is to incorporate a lot of organic material and then nuke your soil. and then you will see a big increase in organic carbon. But if it's active and biologically turning things over, the increases are going to be slow.